Top 5 celebrities Johnny Carson hated most. Behind the warm smile and effortless charm that greeted America nightly for 30 years, lurked judgments as sharp as any punchline Johnny Carson ever delivered. Television's undisputed late-night king, the man who could make or break careers with a nod or a shrug, maintained a carefully crafted public image of genial affability while privately harboring animosities that shaped late-night television for decades. Johnny kept a mental blacklist that was absolutely ironclad, revealed a longtime Tonight Show staffer. Once you were on it, you were never, and I mean never, getting back into his good graces. He'd smile that famous smile while slicing you to ribbons, and most viewers never even knew it was happening. What makes these revelations so fascinating isn't just their content, but how masterfully Carson concealed these feelings during his record-breaking run. The consummate professional on camera, he rarely allowed personal conflicts to visibly affect his performances, yet these private resentments influenced booking decisions, comedy targets, and ultimately the entire landscape of American entertainment. Prepare yourself for the unvarnished reality behind television's most powerful throne, feuds so intense they remained hidden in plain sight across thousands of broadcasts that millions watched without ever suspecting the genuine contempt simmering beneath Carson's trademark charm. 1. Joan Rivers, the protege who committed the unforgivable sin. The most publicly explosive of Johnny Carson's professional animosities involved Joan Rivers, a hatred so profound it transcended mere disappointment to become what Carson himself privately called the greatest betrayal of my professional life. This wasn't just a falling out, explained a senior NBC executive from that era. This was Shakespearean, a mentor-protege relationship that imploded so completely it permanently altered the late-night landscape. Their relationship began in the 1960s when Carson discovered Rivers struggling in comedy clubs and became her champion, regularly featuring her on The Tonight Show and eventually anointing her as his permanent guest host, a position of unprecedented visibility and influence. By the early 1980s, Rivers had guest hosted over 100 episodes, becoming so closely associated with the show that many viewed her as Carson's natural successor. The devastating rupture came in 1986 when Fox offered Rivers her own competing late-night show. According to multiple sources, what transformed a potential professional transition into lifelong animosity wasn't the competition itself, but Rivers' failure to inform Carson personally before the news broke. Johnny learned about it from Fox executives, not from Joan, revealed Carson's longtime producer Fred de Cordova. After everything he'd done for her career, he considered that not just unprofessional, but a personal betrayal that revealed her true character. Carson's response was swift and absolute. Rivers was immediately banned not just from guest hosting, but from appearing on The Tonight Show in any capacity, a prohibition Carson privately insisted remain in his contract and which continued long after his retirement, ending only when Jimmy Fallon took over the show in 2014, years after both Carson and Rivers had died. What made the conflict particularly bitter was Rivers' public insistence that she had tried to call Carson before the announcement. Phone records later revealed she had indeed placed a call to his office, but only hours before the Fox press conference when Carson was unreachable on a flight. To Carson, this last-minute attempt represented not good faith, but calculated, plausible deniability. He told me, "She waited until she knew I couldn't be reached, then she can claim she tried," recalled Carson's second wife, Joanne. Johnny didn't buy it for a second. He said, if she'd really wanted to tell me herself, she had weeks to do it. The final twist in their estrangement came when Rivers' late-night show failed catastrophically, leading to her husband Edgar Rosenberg's suicide. Many industry insiders expected Carson, known for his private generosity despite his public reserve, to reach out during this personal tragedy. His silence spoke volumes about the depth of his sense of betrayal. He told his inner circle, "I feel terrible about Edgar, but Joan made her choice," revealed a close friend of Carson's. The ice never thawed, not even a degree. Their mutual animosity had lasting consequences for comedy itself. Rivers, once the most prominent female comedian in America thanks to Carson's patronage, found herself effectively exiled from mainstream television for years. Meanwhile, Carson became noticeably more guarded about promoting potential successors, creating the fragmented late-night landscape that emerged after his retirement. In her final years, Rivers continued reaching out to Carson, sending occasional notes that received no response. After Carson's death in 2005, she told an interviewer, "I still don't understand it. I truly thought he would forgive me eventually." The fact that he never did reveals a dimension of Carson rarely acknowledged in his public image, an unforgiving nature behind the affable smile that made him television's most beloved star. 2. Wayne Newton, the Las Vegas feud that turned dangerous. Johnny Carson's intense dislike of Wayne Newton represents one of the rare instances where his private animosity spilled over into public view, culminating in threats of physical violence that revealed how serious Carson's private hatreds could become. This wasn't just professional dislike. This got genuinely scary, explained a longtime Carson associate. It was the closest Johnny ever came to an actual physical confrontation with another celebrity. Their conflict originated in the early 1980s when Carson began incorporating jokes about Newton's allegedly effeminate persona into his monologues. What might have remained routine celebrity ribbing, something Carson did to countless stars, escalated when Newton took the unusual step of confronting Carson directly, first through intermediaries and then in person at NBC's Burbank studios. Wayne stormed into the studio unannounced between tapings, recalled a Tonight Show crew member. He told Johnny these jokes were affecting his career in Vegas and needed to stop immediately. Johnny, who didn't respond well to ultimatums from anyone, basically told him comedy doesn't take requests. The situation deteriorated rapidly when Newton, a noted firearms enthusiast with known connections to Vegas casino security, allegedly made statements that Carson perceived as thinly veiled threats. According to multiple sources, Newton suggested that accidents happen in the desert all the time, and that Carson should watch himself if he ever performed in Las Vegas. Carson's response revealed the steel beneath his affable exterior. Rather than backing down, he increased the frequency of Newton jokes, and added new dimensions mocking Newton's financial problems and rumored mob connections. When NBC executives expressed concern about potential blowback, Carson reportedly responded, "I've got more viewers than he's got friends. Let him try something." The conflict reached its public peak in 1991 when Newton, during a television interview, stated that if Carson continued the jokes, he would physically confront him. Carson, breaking his usual rule of never acknowledging personal conflicts on air, responded the following night with a monologue joke. "I don't know why Wayne is so mad. I like his act. I particularly enjoy the parts where he bends over and pulls doves out of his pants." What makes this animosity particularly significant is how it revealed Carson's willingness to use his platform as a weapon when he felt personally attacked. Unlike most of his feuds, which remained private, the Newton conflict demonstrated Carson's understanding of his own power. He knew that millions of viewers laughing at Newton nightly would do far more damage than any physical confrontation. Johnny told his writers, "Keep them coming until he apologizes," revealed a former Tonight Show writer. He viewed it as a matter of principle. No one was going to tell him what jokes he could or couldn't tell on his own show. The feud eventually cooled not through reconciliation, but mutual professional necessity. Newton, recognizing the damage to his image, stopped publicly responding to the joke. Carson, having made his point about who held the real power in this dynamic, gradually reduced the frequency of Newton material. They never reconciled, with Newton later claiming in his autobiography that Carson's animosity stemmed from jealousy over Newton's success in Las Vegas, a claim that reportedly made Carson laugh out loud when he read it. Johnny said, "Now that's funny. Wayne finally told a good joke," recalled Carson's lawyer, Henry Bushkin. Their conflict stands as a rare example of Carson's willingness to bring his private grievances into public view, a testament to both his generally restrained approach to personal conflicts and how seriously he responded when he felt his fundamental professional autonomy was threatened. 3. Fred Silverman, the network executive Carson destroyed. Behind the scenes of television history lurked one of Johnny Carson's most consequential yet little-known animosities, his calculated destruction of NBC executive Fred Silverman, revealing how Carson's private hatreds could alter the very leadership of the network that made him a star. This wasn't just a personality conflict. This was a systematic campaign to remove someone Johnny viewed as a threat to the integrity of his show, explained a former NBC board member. And what makes it remarkable is how few people outside the executive suite even realized it was happening. Their conflict originated when Silverman, after successful runs at CBS and ABC, became NBC's president in 1978, bringing his reputation as a programming wunderkind to the struggling network. Initially, the relationship seemed promising, with Silverman treating Carson with the deference due the network's biggest star. The situation deteriorated when Silverman began suggesting format changes to The Tonight Show, including shorter interviews and more comedy segments to compete with emerging rivals. Johnny viewed the show as his personal fiefdom, noted a longtime NBC executive. When Silverman started sending memos about interview techniques and segment timing, Carson saw it as both professional overreach and personal insult. His attitude was basically, "I've been doing this successfully for 16 years. Who the hell are you to tell me how to do my job?" Rather than confronting Silverman directly, a typical Carson avoidance of direct conflict, he began a subtle but devastating campaign using his unparalleled unrivaled platform. Night after night, Carson's monologues included increasingly pointed references to NBC's last-place ratings and failed programming decisions, always without mentioning Silverman by name, but making the target unmistakable to industry insiders. It was brilliant psychological warfare, revealed a Tonight Show writer from that period. Johnny would say things like, "NBC announced its fall lineup today. They're very excited about it," which is the same thing they said about the Edsel. Everyone in the business knew exactly who was being blamed for those decisions. The campaign escalated when Carson began making his displeasure known to NBC's parent company, RCA. Using his extraordinary leverage, The Tonight Show generated an estimated 17% of NBC's total profits at the time. Carson arranged private meetings with RCA executives where he made it clear that his next contract negotiation would be problematic if Silverman remained in charge. "Johnny never issued an explicit ultimatum," explained an RCA board member. "He didn't have to. When television's biggest star starts suggesting he might be happier elsewhere, you don't need a formal threat to get the message." The strategy proved devastatingly effective. As NBC's primetime ratings continued struggling while Carson's late-night dominance remained unchallenged, the contrast created an unmistakable narrative about where the network's problems originated. By 1981, Silverman's position had become untenable, and he resigned under pressure, a departure industry insiders attributed significantly to Carson's behind-the-scenes campaign. What makes this conflict particularly revealing is how it demonstrated Carson's understanding of his own power and his willingness to exercise it when he felt his territory threatened. Unlike most celebrities who found themselves on Carson's bad side, Silverman actually had institutional authority, but discovered that in the unique power structure of television, Carson's influence ultimately proved greater than that of the network's own president. After Silverman's departure, Carson never publicly acknowledged his role in the executive's downfall. When asked years later about their relationship, he offered only his characteristic smile and a deflecting joke. "Fred who? I'm terrible with names." This quintessentially Carsonian response, using humor to mask genuine animus, perfectly encapsulated how he navigated his most consequential professional hatreds. 4. Frank Sinatra, the standoff between show business titans. The decades-long Cold War between Johnny Carson and Frank Sinatra stands as one of Hollywood's most consequential yet carefully concealed feuds, a mutual animosity between entertainment titans that reflected not just personality conflict but fundamentally opposing views about celebrity, power, and professional conduct. "This wasn't just two big stars disliking each other," explained a veteran NBC executive. "This was a clash between completely different philosophies about how entertainment and fame were supposed to work." Their conflict originated during Sinatra's first Tonight Show appearance after Carson took over as host in 1962. According to multiple sources, Sinatra, accustomed to controlling every aspect of his public appearances, arrived with a list of pre-approved questions and topics, a common practice during the Jack Paar era. Carson, committed to spontaneous conversation rather than scripted exchanges, politely but firmly declined to follow Sinatra's prepared plan. Johnny told him, "I don't work that way," recalled a Tonight Show producer present for the exchange. Sinatra was stunned. Nobody said no to him in those days. The interview went ahead, but was noticeably tense, and afterward, Sinatra told his people, "I'm never doing his show again." He kept that promise for nearly a decade. What transformed professional tension into personal animosity was their fundamentally different approaches to celebrity. Sinatra represented old Hollywood, demanding deference, controlling access, and expecting the world to accommodate his preferences. Carson embodied a newer, more democratized approach, treating all guests equally regardless of their status, and believing spontaneity revealed more authentic moments than careful image management. Frank viewed Johnny's approach as disrespectful to stars who had earned special treatment, explained a mutual acquaintance. Johnny viewed Frank's expectations as entitlement that compromised honest conversation. Neither man was willing to adopt the other's perspective. Their standoff created one of late-night television's most glaring absences throughout the 1960s and early 1970s, as Sinatra, one of America's most significant entertainers, remained conspicuously missing from television's most important talk show. The impasse finally broke in 1976 when Sinatra, promoting a comeback special, recognized Carson's platform had become too important to ignore. Even this reconciliation came with conditions. Before agreeing to appear, Sinatra insisted on approval of the guest list for that episode, ensuring no competing singers would share the spotlight. Carson, normally strict about maintaining control of his show, reluctantly agreed to this single concession, a rare professional compromise that demonstrated his recognition of Sinatra's cultural significance despite their personal personal animosity. "It was like a summit between nuclear powers," observed a staff writer. "Every detail was negotiated through intermediaries. They were cordial on air, but there was a palpable tension that viewers could feel. These weren't two people who liked each other. These were two professionals doing business because circumstances required it." Their mutual dislike persisted until Carson's retirement in 1992. Despite multiple opportunities for further appearances, Sinatra returned to The Tonight Show only once more, during Carson's final week, when declining the invitation would have appeared petty to the public. Even then, observers noted their interaction remained stiffly formal rather than genuinely warm. What makes this long-running animosity particularly significant is how it influenced the broader entertainment landscape. Carson's refusal to accommodate Sinatra's demands for special treatment helped establish a more egalitarian approach to celebrity interviews that continues influencing talk shows today. Meanwhile, Sinatra's resistance to Carson's format represented the last stand of an older star system where the celebrity, not the host, controlled the terms of engagement. In the end, Carson's approach largely prevailed, creating the template for modern talk shows where even the biggest stars understand they must engage in relatively unscripted conversation. Their mutual animosity, while never publicly acknowledged by either man, ultimately helped reshape the relationship between celebrities, talk show hosts, and audiences in ways that continue defining entertainment today. 5. Bob Hope, the comedy legend Carson privately despised. Perhaps the most surprising of Johnny Carson's professional animosities was his intense dislike of Bob Hope, a sentiment that shocked even Carson's closest associates given Hope's revered status in American comedy and his reputation for mentoring younger performers. "This wasn't public knowledge, but Johnny absolutely couldn't stand Hope," revealed Carson's longtime head writer Raymond Siller. "It was the elephant in the room whenever Hope was booked on the show. Everyone on staff knew it except the viewers at home." Their conflict originated not from any specific incident, but from what Carson viewed as Hope's fundamentally inauthentic approach to comedy and television appearances. According to multiple Tonight Show staffers, Hope would arrive with pre-written jokes and canned anecdotes regardless of Carson's questions, creating exchanges that felt rehearsed rather than spontaneous, the cardinal sin in Carson's view of talk show dynamics. "Johnny valued authentic conversation above everything else," explained a Tonight Show producer. "But Hope would essentially perform a monologue no matter what Johnny asked. He'd bring index cards with jokes written by his team of writers and mechanically work through them regardless of the actual conversation. Johnny found it disrespectful to the audience." The situation became increasingly frustrating for Carson as Hope aged and his appearances grew more formulaic. By the 1980s, Hope's Tonight Show visits followed an unchanging pattern, entering to thunderous applause, exchanging a few pleasantries with Carson, then launching into prepared material about his golf game, his NBC specials, and his USO tours, often repeating jokes and stories from previous appearances almost verbatim. After particularly rough Hope segments, Johnny would return to his office and just explode, recalled a production assistant. "He's not talking to me. He's reading at me," he'd say. "It's not a conversation, it's a performance. That's not what this show is about." What made this animosity particularly challenging was Hope's status as an NBC institution and American icon. As the network's longest-serving star and a genuine national treasure due to his decades of entertaining troops, Hope was essentially unbookable despite Carson's personal feelings. This created the awkward situation where Carson had to repeatedly welcome and pretend to enjoy a guest he privately considered the antithesis of good television. Carson's solution was characteristically subtle. While never refusing to book Hope or showing any on-air indication of his true feelings, he gradually reduced the frequency of Hope's appearances and scheduled them in ways that minimized their interaction, often in the show's first segment, allowing Carson to quickly transition to guests he genuinely enjoyed interviewing after the first commercial break. Johnny developed this technique of smiling broadly while not actually engaging, noted a camera operator. He'd nod enthusiastically during Hope's prepared bits, while his eyes showed complete disconnection. Once you knew what to look for, it was actually painful to watch. The most revealing demonstration of Carson's true feelings came during the preparation for his final episode in 1992. When NBC executives suggested Hope make an appearance during Carson's farewell show, Carson exercised his contractual right to absolute control over the final broadcast and firmly declined. Johnny said, "It's my last show, and I want to talk to people I actually enjoy talking to," revealed an executive involved in the planning. What makes this hidden animosity particularly significant is how it represented Carson's purest view of what television conversation should be: authentic, spontaneous, and responsive rather than prepackaged and performed. While publicly maintaining absolute respect for Hope's legacy and contributions, Carson privately viewed him as representing an older, less honest approach to entertainment that contradicted everything The Tonight Show, under Carson's stewardship, stood for. This principle, that genuine conversation, even with its risks and occasional awkwardness, was superior to polished performance disguised as dialogue, became one of Carson's most important legacies to television, influencing generations of hosts who followed him. His private disdain for Hope, while never publicly expressed, reflected his unwavering commitment to this philosophy, even when it put him at odds with one of America's most beloved entertainers. The legacy of Carson's hidden animosities. As we've explored these 5 intense hatreds that shaped Johnny Carson's remarkable career, a more nuanced portrait emerges of the man behind the charming television persona, a complex individual whose conflicts weren't merely personal, but reflected deeper principles about entertainment, authenticity, and professional integrity. What makes Carson's hidden animosities particularly revealing isn't just their intensity, but what they tell us about the values that guided his approach to television. His break with Joan Rivers stemmed not just from competitive jealousy, but from what he perceived as a fundamental breach of loyalty and professional courtesy. His conflict with Frank Sinatra represented not merely a personality clash, but a principled stand against a celebrity system that prioritized image management over authentic conversation. Throughout these conflicts, a consistent thread emerges: Carson's uncompromising insistence on authenticity and his willingness to use his considerable power to defend what he considered the integrity of The Tonight Show as a forum for genuine rather than manufactured moments. Whether rejecting Bob Hope's canned anecdotes or resisting Fred Silverman's format changes, Carson approached his professional relationships with the same commitment to honesty that characterized his best interviews. Johnny didn't hate easily, but when he did, it was absolute, observed a longtime NBC executive. What people miss is that his strongest hatreds weren't about personal slights. They were about violations of his core principles about what television should be and how people should conduct themselves within it. This perspective helps explain why Carson, despite these intense animosities, maintained his reputation as television's consummate professional throughout his career. His conflicts weren't petty or capricious, but rooted in deeply held convictions about entertainment, authenticity, and respect for the audience. Values he refused to compromise even when it cost him relationships or created behind-the-scenes tension. Perhaps most significantly, Carson's willingness to stand his ground against figures as powerful as Sinatra or as institutionally protected as Hope reflected the same confidence that made him television's most trusted interviewer. The man who famously said little about himself on air had no hesitation making his positions clear when he felt his professional territory or principles were threatened. As we reflect on these legendary feuds, we gain insight not just into television's hidden history, but into the complex character of a man whose public warmth coexisted with private steel. Johnny Carson's hatreds, like his interviews, were never casual or performative. They were expressions of a personality that accepted nothing less than absolute commitment to the standards he believed should govern both entertainment and personal conduct. If you found this exploration of television's hidden conflicts enlightening, please hit that like button and subscribe for more glimpses behind entertainment history's carefully constructed facades. We'd love to hear in the comments which revelation surprised you most, or which other television legends you'd like us to investigate in future videos. Until next time, remember that the most compelling dramas in television often unfold not on screen, but behind it. And sometimes, understanding the private battles of our cultural icons helps us better appreciate the authentic moments they created that continue entertaining us decades later.